Seven Aggies have hit the transfer portal after Jim Schlossnagle and his staff jumped town. So who are the LSU Tigers targeting? We got the list and we're talking about it. Buckle up. It's Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm Matt Moscona. Thanks for being here with us. As always, thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, and of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here weekdays for Locked on LSU. Also on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. So LSU now going fishing in the portal with 7 Aggie players jumping in. We've got a list for you who the Tigers should be targeting and some updates there. Could a former LSU baseball player and assistant become the future coach of the Texas A&M Aggies? We'll get to that. And the next two-sport star at LSU could be. We're talking about it all on today's episode here of Locked on LSU, and we are presented by GameTime. Today's episode brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So if you missed the last episode, we went into great detail about Jim Schlossnagle's decision to leave Texas A&M for Texas and what that meant for LSU. And there were really 3 things that we considered. One, of course, was resetting the salary and the salary cap, the benchmark for salaries. And one of the most important effects, certainly, was there were going to be players entering the transfer portal, and that LSU, still with needs to fill out this roster, was going to target some of these A&M players in the transfer portal. And true to form, Wednesday came and 7 Aggies entered the transfer portal. And these weren't just bodies. These are really significant players. In all, when you look at the transfer portal, the draft, and graduation, Texas A&M is losing its top 11 offensive players from this season that just played for a national championship. So whoever takes that job is taking over a much weakened Texas A&M program. So I want to run through the 7 guys that entered the transfer portal and tell you who I think LSU is going to target, and actually who they are going to target and get on campus. But this was as predictable as the sunrise. A&M players flooding the portal, and LSU will be in the mix. I want to start with Jace Laviolette, and he's the power-hitting outfielder. And that's most interesting because after Jim Schlossnagle, it was announced he was taking the job at Texas, Laviolette's the one that jumped on a Twitter and talked about how Texas A&M is the greatest place in the world and was the best decision he ever made. And then less than 24 hours later, Jace Laviolette's in the portal. Now, it's worth noting that he grew up in South Texas, but has family in Acadiana, and was a one-time LSU commit who flipped his commitment from LSU to Texas A&M because of former LSU Tiger Nolan Kane, who was a former LSU player, assistant, now an assistant on A&M, who now has gone with Jim Schlossnagle to Austin. Laviolette loves Michael Early, who's the hitting coach on Schlossnagle's staff, who just went with Schloss to Austin. So the overwhelming feeling here is that Laviolette is going to go to Texas. He had 305 this year, 29 homers. He's a projected early first-round pick for the 2025 draft. I know a lot of you are going to say, yeah, Matt, LSU needs infielders. And LSU does need infielders. You're right. But Jace Laviolette is better than any outfielder LSU has. As a matter of fact, Jace Laviolette is better than any outfielder anybody has. So if you have an opportunity to get him, you get him. And especially on an LSU team that is completely void of power now, with all of its power bats having left, you should be calling Jace Laviolette. But it seems pretty clear that's a guy that is going to absolutely get a bag, and it's probably going to be in Austin playing for Jim Schlossnagle. Kaden Kent is maybe the most interesting name on this list for LSU. And you probably, if you watch the College World Series, you know this story. Kaden Kent is Jeff Kent's son. Jeff Kent, the best power-hitting second baseman of all time. Kaden Kent, as a freshman in 2023, played a ton. He started 21 games and played a lot. at third base. Well, Gavin Grahovac came in this year and took Kaden Kent's job at third base. Well, Kent was sort of a part-time player. He started 24 games and played in 51, so he was a pinch hitter and a lot of stuff. But by the time they got into the postseason, especially after Braden Montgomery's injury, they shuffled the outfield, and Kent ended up playing second base. And he hit .416 in Omaha. And on the season, he hit .327. Now, Kaden Kent is from Lake Travis. That's the Austin area. And there's a lot of people who would assume that he would follow Jim Schlossnagle. But it is my understanding that Kaden Kent was none too happy about being benched this year and isn't super pumped about Jim Schlossnagle jumping town from College Station. So I do not believe Kaden Kent is going to Austin. As a matter of fact, I know LSU has been in touch with Kaden Kent, and I suspect he is going to make a visit to Baton Rouge very soon. And with an immediate need at third base with Tommy White gone, if Kaden Kent picks LSU, he is a plug-and-play starter day one somewhere on that infield. And keep in mind also, money isn't really going to matter for Kaden Kent. I mean, his dad made like $200 million during his major league career. He's not the one looking for a little NIL scratch. He's going to go where he can play and have the best opportunity. And it's probably LSU for Kaden Kent. So circle that one. I mentioned that Kent lost his job at third base to Gavin Grahovac, who, by the way, was the SEC Freshman of the Year. Well, Grahovac also entered the transfer portal on Wednesday. Grahovac, 67 starts for the Aggies, hit .298 in his freshman season with 23 home runs. Another power bat, but I'm told LSU has no shot. He's probably going to Texas, where he also will get a big bag. What you're going to find here is sort of an underlying story of how this is all going with Texas. I'll circle to that when I'm done with this list. Another name to keep an eye on if you're LSU is Max Coffer. Max Coffer is a sophomore catcher. In 2023, as a freshman, he started 46 games, but he only hit .183. He lost his job in 2024. Played in 14 games, started just 7 times. He hit .250. But LSU has an immediate need at catcher. We've talked about this a bit. You know at LSU that you've got Blaze Priester coming in, who's probably your plug-and-play starter. You've got Cade Arambidi committed out of the high school ranks, but he is a draft risk, so we'll see. You have to add another catcher. I know Eddie Yaman is a guy, the transfer from Dayton, who has caught in his past, but he's 6'5" now, and I'm told he's a first base DH, possibly third baseman, but he's not going to catch. Luis Hernandez from Indiana State, also maybe a desperate emergency catcher, but not someone that's going to be in your rotation. LSU's immediate need for catching depth could mean Max Coffer as an LSU target, and you got a pretty good shot there as well. The 3 other players that hit the portal from Texas A&M, Jack Bell, who started just 3 times, played 19 games on the infield. There's not going to be interest there. Caden Sorrell, who's an outfielder, was freshman All-SEC, very highly touted. Played in 62 games with 48 starts, hit .275 with 11 homers. That's a really good player, but the word on him is that Sorrell very likely follows Jim Schlossnagle to Texas. And then Hayden Schott is the 7th, and he's a DH outfielder. He hit .335 this season. Let me say that again. He hit .335 this season. 68 starts. He hit 8 homers. He was a transfer from Columbia into Texas A&M this year. So he's got 1 year remaining as a graduate. LSU probably kicks the tires, but they really don't need another outfielder DH type player. As I mentioned, you've already signed Luis Hernandez. You've already signed or gotten the commitment from Eddie Yaman. So on that front, you feel good at that position. So would you add Schott if you could? Sure. It seems like he'll probably have better options, though. So those are the 7 Texas A&M players that have entered the portal. Now, I think LSU has a really, really good chance to get Kaden Kent and Max Coffer, the infielder and the catcher. But that leaves a very big hole still on the infield that I want to talk about, and we'll do that as we continue here on Locked On LSU. Don't you move. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. Y'all, we are getting close to the start of football season. It's the next event that we'll experience. LSU, USC out at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. If you want to be there in that number, get to GameTime. Download the GameTime app. It is an awesome ticket marketplace for you to get to the app and to get your tickets for whatever sporting event it is. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball as well, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And by the way, I love this feature. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch, or to kickoff or whatever it may be. So as you get closer to the time of the event, you're going to see those prices decline. So you can get some great deals as well. So I love the GameTime app. I love whenever I'm in a different city, I always try to catch a sporting event. My wife and I were in New York not long ago. We went and caught a Knicks game against the Nets. We bought tickets on GameTime. So I use the app. You should as well. You can customize your sports experience there with GameTime. If it's last-minute deals or flash deals, there's all-in pricing. There's so many things in there that you need to get accustomed with the GameTime app. Just understand that if you're looking to go to the game, you need the GameTime app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets this season. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to save some money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to save $20 off your first purchase. Let me say that again. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Locked on College for $20 off your first purchase. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Glad to have you aboard with us here on Locked on LSU. And we've gone through the 7 players from Texas A&M that have entered the transfer portal. And as best I can understand, I think Kaden Kent and Max Coffer, the infielder and the catcher, are the 2 players of these 7 that LSU has the best shot to land. I think Kaden Kent would probably have LSU at the top of his list. And my understanding is he's going to visit LSU very, very soon. And Jay Johnson's going to try to close there. But something worth keeping in mind is LSU still has a very desperate need at shortstop. We don't know what's going to happen with Michael Braswell. He's a junior. He's in his draft year. He's probably a back end of the draft guy, so we don't know if he's going to be picked. And even if he is, does he take the money or does he try to run it back at LSU? It's also worth noting that Gavin Killeen, the Louisville shortstop, is still in the transfer portal. We talked about Gavin on yesterday's episode. So if you missed the last episode, you can go back and listen to it. But the bottom line is the number 1 player in the portal. He's a projected top 10 pick in next year's draft. He has visited Vanderbilt, Tennessee, LSU. He was waiting to visit Texas A&M. Well, now Schlossnagle's gone. So does he still visit A&M? Does he wait until they hire a coach? Does he visit Texas now? It feels, outside looking in, like Gavin Killeen is looking for a payday before his big payout in next year's draft. And I can't blame him. It's how the market's set up. And if he wants to get it, God bless, go get it. And LSU's probably not going to be the highest bidder. LSU has a lot to offer, but they're not going to be the highest bidder. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Gavin Killeen, but it still leaves a spot open where LSU desperately needs a shortstop. And maybe as the portal window continues to churn, when A&M eventually hires a coach, whoever they hires, that from another sitting head coach that comes in that potentially sees more transfers hit the portal. But I don't know. We'll see. But if you don't get Gavin Killeen or another transfer, your best option is to bring Michael Braswell back. And so maybe that's some combination of saying, hey, look, whatever you're going to get in the draft, why don't we do an NIL deal to get you here, come back, run it back, trying to win a championship, play on you start in the middle of the lineup, play on a team that's got a great shot to win a championship, and then go into the draft next year. Yeah, you lose your leverage. You're not going to get as much money, but maybe you make that up on the front end here with an NIL deal. So we'll have to wait and see how that happens. But, an infield that could potentially include Stephen Milam at second, Kaden Kent at third, Michael Braswell at short, and then maybe Eddie Yaman or Luis Hernandez at first. Like, you could do far worse. Blaze Priester behind the plate with a platoon, maybe with someone like Max Coffer, or if you get Cade Aaron Beatty here and he really pops off as a freshman. Now you have something that looks really, really good. But you got to push some of these deals across the finish line. And there's nobody better as a recruiter in college baseball than Jay Johnson. One other name I do want to mention to you to keep an eye on. Now, and real quick, I don't want to lose my train of thought here. We have been telling you about Bear Collins, the catcher from St. Mary's. And LSU is very much in a holding pattern there. I think they would take the commitment. I think he would commit, from the best I understand. But for example, if Max Coffer from Texas A&M is on the board and interested, that might be a better option. A guy who has been a full-time starter in the SEC, did so as a freshman. Maybe that's a better option than college. Don't know. But again, if you're looking for depth, one of those two guys would make a lot of sense. We'll see which way LSU goes based on which options are available there. But there's one other player in the portal not associated with Texas A&M that I think is relevant for LSU to keep an eye on, and that's Tennessee lefty Matthew Dallas. 6'5". He's out of the Memphis area. And we keep talking about how LSU has to rebuild this pitching staff. They've lost 15 pitchers off the staff, either to the draft or eligibility or the portal. They've lost 15 pitchers. You got a handful coming back, you got a handful coming in the freshman class, and you've signed a handful so far in the portal so far, but you still need more arms. And Matthew Dallas is a 6'5" lefty. He didn't pitch a ton for Tennessee in his freshman season, but he's a low mid-90s guy. And if you're bringing 93 to 95 from the left side, that's something a lot of hitters, no matter what level, just don't see every day. So that's a guy who very much is on LSU's radar, and I'm told that's an LSU Mississippi State decision for Matthew Dallas. So another guy to keep an eye on. But I mentioned Texas and how they're sort of approaching this right now, and with Jace Laviolette, I believe is a Texas lean, as I'm told. Gavin Grahovac, the third baseman, likely a Texas lean, as I'm told. Caden Sorrell is likely a Texas lean. I was told today that Texas should have at least 11 players on campus this weekend, and that the Texas boosters are prepared to spend north of $2 to $3 million in NIL deals this weekend to help Jim Schlossnagle build out that roster. So Texas is coming into the SEC, and they might not have a great facility, and they might not have a lot of recent success, but they got a lot of money, and they're trying to buy their way back up to the top. And I'll say this again about Jim Schlossnagle. Schlossnagle's never won anything of significance in his career. He took TCU to the World Series and he built a nice program there. And he just took A&M to the championship series. But the bottom line is, you're a lot better coach when you have Braden Montgomery. And Montgomery was an Aggie because they paid him $750K. He was going home to play with a lot of his friends at Mississippi State. He's from the Jackson area. And A&M wrote a big check. And so the best player in the country this year, one of the best players in the country this year, went to Texas A&M. Not because he wanted to, but because that was a lot of money to pass up for anybody, let alone a guy that's going to play 1 year of college baseball and get $750,000. So my point is, if Schlossnagle's getting the same support or more in Austin, which it appears like he is, he's going to build a roster really quickly that's ready to compete, really of no consequence of his own, just because Texas has deep pockets and they're ready to compete right away. One of the other interesting storylines to keep an eye on, and I mentioned this in the tease, is a potential former LSU Tiger potentially becoming the coach of the Aggies. Nolan Kane, who was introduced as an assistant with Jim Schlossnagle at Texas. I was told today there was a lot of player support at Texas A&M of the remaining players for Nolan to try to keep some of the stability of the players that remain and to keep some of that culture in place. Now, we know Nolan Kane was a member of LSU's 2009 national championship team as a pitcher. He was a longtime assistant under Paul Maneri and became the lead recruiter for Paul Maneri, and ultimately was hired in College Station by Jim Schlossnagle. So he's been there the last 3 years with Schloss, and now went with Schlossnagle to Austin, was part of that group that was introduced. And, I initially heard names, big names, like A&M was going to swing big. Nick Mingione, who just brought Kentucky to the College World Series. Tadlock from Texas Tech, who has had a really good run there in Lubbock. Skip Johnson from Oklahoma. But today I was told, hey, there is a groundswell of support for Nolan Kane to get the A&M job and it's a player-led groundswell. Now, I don't ever think that's a good idea. You don't let the inmates run the asylum. I'm not calling college kids inmates, and it's an expression. Please understand. But we see this in sports sometimes where you make the convenient hire. And listen, I want to be very clear. I think the world of Nolan Kane, and I think he's going to be a fantastic coach one day. But it's a hard justification that if your first ever head coaching job is the Texas A&M job, especially under these circumstances, if you're A&M, it would stand to reason that you're going to go nail this with a big-time proven head coach because you have a bankroll to do it. But you don't make an emotional hire because your your players have hurt feelings with their coach leaving and want the assistant that everybody likes. We saw Missouri do this in football with Barry Odom. We've seen it's a tale as old as time. We've seen this plenty, and seldom does it ever work out. But Nolan could be in play there, and if he gets the job, I will be thrilled for Nolan as a friend. From an A&M perspective, I would think, boy, they've got to try to aim higher of a more proven head coach in this situation, given all the circumstances. But we'll continue to see as it plays out. Okay, that storyline is not going anywhere anytime soon. LSU is targeting Texas A&M players. More are likely to jump into the portal. They still got a head coaching hire to make. If they do hire a sitting head coach, more players will jump in the portal. So make sure you are locked in here and locked on LSU for all of the news about building this LSU baseball roster throughout these wild times in the portal. But when we come back, LSU has its next two-way possible star, football and basketball. It's confirmed. We'll talk about him next on Locked on LSU, your team every day. You probably know the name Treyz Green. He's a 6'7" freak show tight end that was by some services the number one player in the state of Louisiana. It was either Treyz Green or Dominic McKinley as the number one player in Louisiana for the class of 2024 on the football field. Treyz Green began his high school career at East Feliciana. As a senior, he transferred to Zachary, was part of a great Zachary Bronco football team there. And when you have a guy in high school or any level that's 6'7" with freakish athleticism, jumping ability, and great hands, yeah, that's going to be a problem for high school defensive backs. That's going to be a problem for college defensive backs to deal with. Well, Treyz Green, apparently his true love and passion is actually basketball. And I had a chance to talk to LSU men's basketball coach Matt McMahon several weeks back, and I asked him about Treyz Green when we were talking about the roster. And he wouldn't answer the question. Not that he was being dismissive. He was very forthright and said, I just don't know if, just from a NCAA rule standpoint, if I can talk about Treyz Green. Now, Treyz was already signed as a football signee, but as far as roster spots and what the roster limits would be for LSU basketball, Matt McMahon wasn't sure if he could talk about Treyz Green, so he didn't. But one thing that I know, and I candidly had a chance to talk to Treyz several months back, had a meal with him, as a matter of fact, and spent a lot of time one evening with him. My sense is that basketball is his true love. Here's the problem, though. There's a lot of guys in basketball that are 6'7", that are athletic and can jump with soft hands. You know what I mean? There's a lot of those. In football, there's not a lot of tight ends that are 6'7", freakishly athletic, can jump out the gym, soft hands, quick feet, all that sort of stuff. That makes you a stud in football. It makes you just another guy in basketball. Now, I'm not saying Treyz Green won't be a great basketball player. His junior year at East Feliciana, he averaged 27 and 11. He is a talented guy that can jump. He can give you rim protection even at 6'7" because of his athleticism and his length. And all this to say, Treyz Green, when LSU formally released the basketball roster for this upcoming season, Treyz Green's on it, wearing number 8 as a power forward. So he is going to give it a go as a two-way player. And we've seen a lot of players attempt to go to be dual sport players at LSU. Like Ben McDonald back in the 80s played baseball and basketball. Marcus Spears played football and tried to play basketball, but after about 1 week of conditioning said, this ain't for me. I stuck with football. It was a good decision. We've seen guys do football and track. I mean, Trendon Holiday, Benny Brazell, seen that plenty. And then you've seen guys play football and baseball plenty. Chad Jones did it, the Dreadlocks of Doom. Jared Mitchell, Chris Jackson, the punter on the football team, who also played outfield for LSU baseball. Remember, there's that spring game where Chris Jackson was playing in a weekend series out at the box, and he ran over and he punted in the spring game wearing his baseball pants. Mo Hampton here recently, who was a highly touted safety and baseball player, passed on a boatload of money to come to LSU and play two sports. Spencer Ware is another one that was a two-way guy. So we've seen athletes be two-sport players at LSU. Seldom has it worked for football and men's basketball, in large part because of the crossover of the seasons. Treyz Green's on scholarship, on a football scholarship at LSU. And basketball starts their conditioning and their preseason workouts in the fall, and then they begin playing in November. And so if you're Treyz Green, November, you're gearing up to play Alabama in Tiger Stadium while your team tips off and starts playing games. and you wouldn't be able to join them until January. So you'd miss November and December and then join up in January. So how quickly could you ramp up and assimilate? I don't know. It's an unenviable task. It's a hard thing to do that you don't see many guys doing. Julius Peppers did it. Jimmy Graham did it at Miami. There are some where it's worked, but they're few and far between. But Treyz Green is going to try to be the next, as he is formally and officially on the LSU men's basketball roster, wearing number 8 as a power forward, who'll be entering his freshman season as a tight end and a power forward for the LSU football team and the men's basketball team. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this edition of Locked on LSU. However you might be listening on your favorite podcast app, please subscribe, rate us, leave a review, let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single weekday and actually every single day because of bonus content for Locked on LSU. And thanks to everybody watching on YouTube. Please smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Until next time, this is Locked on LSU, your team every day.